I was sent to Halcyon Reach to check boxes, not to burn anything down. That was the job. Colonial Ward Registry. Intake compliance. Third-tier auditor. 11 years of it. I flew out to the old station in a rented shuttle, with a tablet full of forms and a return ticket already booked for the following morning. Halcyon Reach had been a mining relay once, then nothing. Then, 2 years ago, a foundation with a soft name and a softer brochure had leased the husk of it and refit the docking ring into what they called a sanctuary. The pamphlets showed sunlit corridors and a garden under glass. New identities. New names. A clean start for children who had lost every world they'd ever known. Escape the past, the brochure said, in gold script. Begin again. My job was to confirm the numbers matched the children and sign the quarterly compliance line so the funding kept flowing. I expected a long, boring day of counting small faces against a manifest. The corridors were sunlit, at least. Real light, piped down through old ore shafts and scrubbed clean. Children moved through them in soft gray tunics, quiet, orderly, herded gently from meal hall to classroom to rest hour by staff who smiled with the practiced warmth of people paid to smile. Nothing about it looked wrong. That was the first thing that should have warned me. The second thing was the manifest. I counted heads in the East Wing at 0900 and got 61. The morning intake log, filed an hour earlier by the station's own registrar, said 58. I counted again, 61. I flagged it as a clerical error, because that is what 11 years of this job teaches you to call the first crack you find, and moved on to the West Wing. The station itself worked hard to keep you from noticing the seams. Every hallway smelled faintly of something warm baking somewhere out of sight, though I never once found a kitchen large enough to account for it. The glass-domed garden the brochure promised was real, and it was lovely. Vines trained along old ore conduits, real soil trucked up at real expense. Birdsong piped through hidden speakers to cover the low mechanical hum a station this old never quite loses. Every detail had been chosen. That was what nagged at me before I had a single fact to hang the feeling on. Sanctuaries built by people who actually care tend to be a little rough at the edges, a little improvised. This one had been designed the way a showroom is designed, for the person walking through with a compliance tablet, not for the children living in it after that person left. I found her in the West Wing, sitting apart from the others on a bench too big for her, turning something small over and over in her fingers. Pale violet skin, faint freckles that caught the light like they were lit from underneath, thin in the way that isn't dramatic, just quiet. A child who had been fed enough to survive and no more. She didn't look up when I sat down near her. She kept working the little tin pendant between her fingers, worn smooth from handling. "What's your name?" I asked. "Ray," she said, after a while. Not the name on any registry tag I'd seen. They gave me a new one. I kept the old one for myself. I made a note. Ordinary enough. Resettlement programs renamed children constantly, for safety, for a clean break from whatever had taken their families. I had signed off on 100 such notes without a second thought, but something in the way she said, "for myself," like she was hiding it, stayed with me longer than it should have. I told the West Wing steward I'd like her file. He said the terminal was down for maintenance. I told him I'd wait. He said maintenance could take hours. I said I had hours. It took him 40 minutes to find a reason to walk away from me entirely. In that 40 minutes I did what I'd come to do, on the surface of it. Walked the wings, counted small faces, matched them to a manifest that mostly, almost, nearly lined up. 61 against 58 was the kind of gap a tired auditor could talk herself into ignoring by lunch, and I understood, watching myself consider it, exactly how this place had operated for 2 years, without a single flag reaching my office. It didn't rely on cruelty to hide. It relied on people like me being reasonable. I have read a great many falsified logs in 11 years. Most of them were lazy. A number changed, a date smudged, hoping no one with real authority ever looks twice. Halcyon Reach's ledgers were not lazy. Someone had built 2 systems, one for auditors like me, clean and slow and exactly matching the brochure, and one underneath it, tracking a different kind of movement. Children didn't leave through the front berth on manifested transports. They left through a service airlock on the station's dark side, in 2s and 3s, aboard unregistered haulers that filed no arrival record anywhere in the sector. The paperwork called it placement. The placement fees were not listed anywhere the registry would ever see, because the registry wasn't paying them. Families were. Not adoptive families reaching for a child to love. Buyers, the kind who wanted small hands too young to refuse work, or blood that tested useful for something, or simply a quiet, obedient shape to keep a house. The sanctuary sold the story of a new world. What it delivered was old and ugly, wearing new clothes. Ray was on the service manifest for that night's transfer. Her intake number matched a placement code already logged as paid. I want to say I felt fury first. I didn't. I felt cold and very still, the way you go still when the floor tilts and you understand you're the only one standing on it who's noticed. I could have called it in through proper channels, filed a flag, waited for a registry cutter to make the 2-day crossing, let the wheels turn the way wheels are built to turn. By the time any of that reached Halcyon Reach, 61 children would be 58 again, and then fewer, and the ledgers would once more show a clean and boring number for whoever came to check next. So I did the smaller, stupider thing instead. I went and found Ray, and I told her to stay close to me and say nothing, no matter what she heard. She looked at me for a long moment, with eyes that had already learned not to trust an adult's promises. Then she nodded once and put her hand, small, cold, into mine, and that was the whole of it. No speech, no scene, just a child deciding, against everything she'd learned, to try trusting one more adult before the night was over. I used my registry credentials for the one thing they were actually good for, a full facility compliance lockdown, the kind reserved for suspected structural failure or contagion, the kind that seals every airlock on the ring and summons an automatic distress beacon to the nearest patrol lane whether the station's owners want it or not. It is not subtle. It is not supposed to be. I triggered it from a maintenance terminal the steward had forgotten to lock, and I watched the corridor lights flip from gold to warning white, and I heard, 3 decks down, the service airlock they'd meant to load children through grind to a stop half open, jammed by a system that did not care what anyone's ledger said. The Foundation's people came looking for me within minutes. I will not pretend it was calm. There was shouting, and a man twice my size telling me I'd cost them everything, standing close enough that I could smell the fear under his anger. Not for the children. Never once for the children. But for the ledgers, and the fees and the arrangement now coming apart around him in real time. He grabbed for the terminal panel once, as if he could still talk it back into obedience, and the system ignored him the way it had been built to. It held. Registry override codes are built stubborn for exactly this reason, and I had filed the flag with every falsified ledger entry attached before I ever touched the lockdown, so that even if he'd put his hands on me, the truth was already 3 jumps ahead of him, headed somewhere he couldn't reach. I told him so, once, plainly, and then I stopped answering him at all. The patrol cutter took 9 hours to arrive. I spent them in a storage locker with Ray, sitting against cold bulkhead with her tin pendant warm in my closed fist, because she'd pressed it into my hand and asked me to hold it for her, the way you hand someone something when you've decided they're not going to disappear on you either. I didn't sleep. I counted her breathing instead, slow and even, and let that be the number that mattered. By the time the cutter's boarding party cracked the outer seal, the Foundation had 2 ships' worth of unregistered transfer records they couldn't explain, and a lockdown log with my name on every line of it. That was enough. It is rarely everything. These things never end as cleanly as the report makes them sound. But it was enough to stop that night's transfer, and the next one, and to put real registry eyes on Halcyon Reach for good. I flew home with Ray asleep against my shoulder the whole crossing, her real name, the one she'd kept for herself, written now on paperwork that was, for once, exactly what it claimed to be. She still has the tin pendant. I never did take it back.